So I saw Fantastic Beasts: The Crimes of Grindelwald, which is a sequel to the first movie and a prequel to the Harry Potter series. This isn't based on a book, but instead the screenplay is written by J.K. Rowling herself. It's directed by David Yates, who made the later and weaker installments of the Harry Potter films, as well as that terrible Legend of Tarzan movie. So let me just do a quick preamble before we get started. I thought the first Fantastic Beasts was fine, maybe underwhelming. It was kind of muddled in parts, but it had its redeeming features. Since it was released, I've had the chance to watch it again and I've always avoided it. Something about the commercial nature of the filmmaking put me off. It felt more like a product rather than a creative film made with artistic passion. I do, however, enjoy the Harry Potter series. Despite their missteps, they have such a warm charm to them, especially the earlier ones. So then we come to Fantastic Beasts: The Crimes of Grindelwald, and you remember exactly why prequels are so disliked. It strays into the territory of things like the Hobbit trilogy and the Star Wars prequels. Things that worked perfectly in Harry Potter are messed with and over-explained, which results in contradictions, and now they make no sense. The script is so obsessed with minute details that it fails to form a coherent and flowing narrative. They've shoved in so many characters and subplots that it makes it difficult to follow, all in an attempt to shoehorn in meaningless references to connect them to the Harry Potter series. The movie as a whole felt really choppy. The opening scene was good, for the most part, but then the film ground to a halt and the pacing dragged for the following 2 hours. There's clearly scenes missing that must have been cut out for some reason, and it still feels bloated. It's overstuffed with subplots to the point where they take up so much more screen time than the main plot it leaves the narrative feeling confused. The film has a lack of focus. It feels like a movie made entirely of subplots. If someone asked me what the main story was, I guess it would be the fight against Grindelwald. But it gets so little emphasis I wouldn't be certain. For example, there's 3 romance subplots, arguably more depending on how you look at it. One of which is incredibly dumb. One woman thinks the guy she likes is marrying someone else because there was a misprint in a newspaper. That's something a 10-second conversation could fix, but the film drags it out for hours. And why it's considered fine for her to be angry with him about this, I don't know. In the previous film they weren't even dating, but I guess they're in love now, all of a sudden. I like how this film does all the character development between movies so the writers don't have to worry about it. That does make it come across like their personalities completely change between films, but who cares what the audience thinks? Then you have the Fantastic Beast story elements that add nothing of value and should have been removed entirely. They take up screen time that would have been better served elsewhere. And why the hell was there some old alchemist guy pottering around? He had a couple of stupid lines and then does something towards the end that should have been given to an established character. He felt shoved in there to make some kind of reference rather than serving an actual purpose. I had big problems with the editing and parts of the cinematography too. The opening scene was a good enough starting point, and despite its many problems, it was somewhat enjoyable. They had a few shots where the camera would swoop around in this weird motion that I found slightly disorientating, and when you couple that with all the quick edits, it can be difficult to keep up with what's going on. Sometimes the camera cuts as often as once or twice a second. They would cut away from shots with really weird timing. You also get some really intense close-ups of people's faces when they're just having a normal conversation. You should save those extreme close-ups for the more intense parts of the movie. The colour palette was so dull and lifeless. It reminded me of the original Twilight movie.
It was horrible.
The trailers were more vibrant than the actual film. There's going to be spoilers from here on out. Honestly, the film is terrible and you shouldn't waste your time with it, but I thought I'd warn you just in case. The film is an insult to the intelligence of the audience. There's plot holes everywhere. They undo things from the first Fantastic Beasts. At the end of the first movie, Jacob had lost his memory, and then it's suddenly back in this film. Apparently now the mind wipe spell from the first film only gets rid of bad memories. So did all those muggles at the end of the first movie who had their mind wiped only have bad memories and no good ones? Surely they would have some good memories after discovering magic is real. Or do all these regular people still remember everything? When Hermione wipes the mind of her parents so they don't remember her in one of the Harry Potter films, does she only wipe their bad memories? I'd imagine they have lots of good memories with their daughter, so they must remember her now, unless her parents really hated her and they have nothing but bad memories. They rewrite elements from the first film and downright ignore other parts. If you took 3 or 4 scenes from the first movie and put them in this, you could completely erase the first movie from existence because this sequel undoes so much of what happened. And to compound the issue, Fantastic Beasts: The Crimes of Grindelwald feels uneventful too. It feels like a stepping stone for the filmmakers to get to the movie they actually want to make. And apparently they want to make 3 more of these. This is the second film with these characters now, and they still feel underdeveloped. I'm not attached to any of them. They are weaker and less defined characters than any of the people from the Harry Potter movies. Even the secondary or background characters from the Harry Potter series had stronger personalities than anyone in these Fantastic Beast films. I mean, take Newt. I don't feel like I know him very well, at all. He's shy to the point of it being a mental illness, and he likes animals. And that's about it. We're made to believe he's meant to be a nice guy, but his actions show us the opposite. This one woman works for him and helps him with the animals. She clearly fancies Newt, but he doesn't take it any further or state he's not interested. It's pretty scummy of him to lead her on just to get some cheap labour out of her. Newt's brother is nothing but nice to him, but when the brother is knocked over by a spell, Newt is elated and claims it's the best moment of his life. I just found him incredibly irritating.
That might have been the best moment of my life.
Irritating prick. Oh, and because of the events in the first film, Newt isn't allowed to travel abroad. They state it multiple times in the movie, so you'd think this would be a major obstacle for him to overcome, but it's never a problem, so who cares? Then you have Tina. Yes, I had to look up her name. She's barely in the film at all. Jacob and Queenie are the most likeable, but you can't say much about them besides that they're nice. And they're superfluous to the story anyway. Gargamel is just a generic bad guy. The role could have been played by anyone. He does bad guy things not because that's fitting with his character, because he doesn't have one. He does bad guy things because he's supposed to be the bad guy. It's just a lazy way for the writer to go, look, he's evil. It's incredibly transparent. Dumbledore is a complete idiot. The movie establishes he and Grindelwald have this thing where they can't fight each other. So Dumbledore could do whatever he wants and Grindelwald would be powerless to stop him. Dumbledore could help that Credence guy, he could stand in the way of other people so they don't get killed. He could do anything but doesn't for some reason. He has the ultimate plot armour and does nothing with it. Speaking of Credence, much of the time is spent with him, even though he has next to no lines and simply wanders around looking sad while other people talk at him. He's on a mission to find out who he is. For quite a while I didn't understand what he was going around trying to achieve. Who you are is a question that is answered by your personality traits, your history and your beliefs. Quite late into the movie it turns out what he actually meant was he wants to know who his parents are. I'm sorry, but why didn't you clearly state that from the beginning? Asking who someone is a deeper question than who their parents are, and it was needlessly making his objectives unclear. It doesn't help that the costume designs are so very pedestrian. Compare Dumbledore from Harry Potter to how he is portrayed in Fantastic Beasts. It's just a guy wearing a grey suit. He could be anyone. Then you have about 10 or 20 other characters that are thrown into the film and clutter it up and make it overstuffed. The characters have no motivations for their actions, or if they do, it's incomprehensible. Credence wants to find his parents, even though he didn't mention it in the last movie. Grindelwald, I think, wants to stop World War II, and everyone else wants to stop him from stopping World War II. I think that's what happened. Some of the visuals were good enough, but some were very lazy. Cats with big eyes. Really, that's as creative as you can get. It's clear to me J.K. Rowling struggles with writing for a visual medium. There's far too many people standing around telling you what's happening rather than showing it. There's so much exposition my ears were bleeding. The opening scene is a prison breakout where one of Grindelwald's followers attempts to break him out of jail, but the twist is they've done a body reversal transformation thing. So Grindelwald is actually the follower and the follower is actually Grindelwald. Okay, fine, but wouldn't it have been more interesting to show how they managed to switch with no one noticing? And this then turns the scene into Grindelwald breaking one of his followers out of prison, but we clearly see he doesn't care about the lives of his followers at all, so why is he doing it exactly? What's going on? And this is the best scene in the movie and it makes no sense. So the film is building up to the climax, and just before the good guys confront Grindelwald, this guy pops up and gives a boring flashback. He's had a few lines earlier in the movie, but I generally don't have a clue who he is. He just pops up and starts prattling on and on. It was at this point I leaned over to my girlfriend and asked her what was going on, but she just shrugged. It honestly felt like it came out of nowhere and completely halted the story in its tracks. So after about 5 minutes of this monologue, it turns out he knew who the parents of Credence were, but the second he finishes explaining it, a woman jumps in and says he's wrong. We then get another flashback for 5 minutes while she tells us what really happened, only to come to the conclusion that she doesn't know who the parents are. So we just had 2 flashbacks to arrive right back where we started. I think you need to work on that script of yours. The twist at the end of the movie that Credence is a member of the Dumbledore family rang completely false. I didn't believe it for a second. It felt like J.K. Rowling was making it up as she went along. Yes, I know writing a fantasy movie is making it up, but it came across like there was no planning involved. It was a cheap reveal to try and elicit a reaction from the audience. You could make the argument that Grindelwald was lying to Credence and that he might not be a Dumbledore, but honestly, I don't care. The fact it was added in at all speaks volumes to how lazy the writing is and how dumb they believe the audience to be. My mind completely rejected the idea. It came off like bad fanfiction, the worst fanfiction. And because that's the ending of the movie, I left on a pretty sour note. It's only added in to give the hardcore fans something to talk about until the next cash grab. I found the movie to have too much in the way of modern politics, and this wouldn't be so bad if J.K. Rowling hadn't been bragging about it everywhere. Sure, the film has a fairly diverse cast when it comes to race and gender and so on, but it is so very clearly tokenism and it's quite insulting. They pushed the feminist angle quite hard, and one character even states, Paris is a progressive city that will allow a wizard to marry a non-wizard. Did people really talk like that in the 1920s? I'm on record as saying I dislike overt modern politics in movies, even if I agree with it. I find it distracting and I've never found a case where it actually improves the movie. It's either tolerable or detracts from the film. I suppose the exception would be if it's a film based on modern politics, but that doesn't really count. That's not what I'm talking about and you know it. What annoys me about Fantastic Beasts 2 is that there's clearly a discussion to be had here, but the film fails to present both sides. Or even outside the modern political sphere, there's a discussion to be had between the differing points of view of the characters. One character decides to join up with Grindelwald, which is fine, but it's done in such a way to be completely unconvincing. You would have thought they would at least have a discussion between the characters to show them being pulled in different directions, but no, they do try to set it up earlier in the film, but they do such a poor job of it. Grindelwald talks about his evil plan and how he's going to destroy everything, and then this character does a complete U-turn and joins him because he's very convincing. What does that mean? He didn't make a convincing argument. It must be magic, I guess.
Well, whenever you notice something like that, a wizard did it.
In areas, it's incredibly dark. It has infanticide, implied rape. It's dark. It really isn't for kids. Sure, in Harry Potter, Voldemort tried to kill Harry, but 1, he didn't succeed, and 2, it was presented in a more family-friendly way, and they didn't show it in any great detail. I mean, even in the recent Halloween movie, they didn't kill the baby. It's most definitely a film with adult themes, but it talks down to you and delivers a stupid political message as if you were a child. And again, I'm not saying I disagree with your political point of view, but don't talk down to the audience. Much of the movie has long sections that are dark, moody and grim, which is then immediately undercut with a bit of goofy humour seconds later. It's a constant clash. And God only knows why magic people aren't allowed to marry muggles. I mean, why not? Who made this law? Why is the wizarding world so restrictive? What is the punishment if they do get married? It's as if as soon as you move away from Hogwarts, the whole illusion crumbles. Their world building is crap. It's crap. They fail to establish any reason why the wizarding world needs to hide away from the non-magic people. In the Harry Potter series, you don't question the division because Hogwarts is isolated from the world at large. Well, that and the Harry Potter movies are actually entertaining, so you don't get bored and start asking basic questions about the film's universe. And worst of all, it is criminally boring. They have a few interesting ideas and fail to explore them in any way. The opening scene has some good ideas, but they immediately forget about them as soon as the scene is over. They don't explore or develop them, unfortunately. The film is lazy and exploitative. The trailers give the impression there will be a lot of time spent at Hogwarts, but all the stuff in the trailer is just about everything that's in the actual film. It feels like a cash grab selling to established fans on the basis it's connected to the Harry Potter universe. But that won't work on me.
You didn't take the bait, did you, punk? I wish you'd take more bait. We'll get you, don't you worry.
I would rate this a 2 out of 10. It's too dark for kids, it's too dumb for adults, it's so bloated and convoluted, it's quite difficult to follow. It's a complete waste of time. Thank you for watching. If you've seen the film, I'd love to know what you thought, so please leave a comment. If you enjoyed the video, please feel free to give it a like, and if you haven't already, please subscribe and hit that bell icon for notifications. Self-promotion over. I'll see you next time.